Good morning, students. I hope you are doing well at home. In the lecture so far, we have learned some poetic types. We have learned so far lyric, then we learned sonnet, elegy, ode, and the last video that I sent to you on your WhatsApp was about epic. Some more two concepts are left, and today in the presentation we are going to have a look at the concept of idyll. So, what exactly is this poetic type, that is idyll, and how idylls are written, what are the features of idyll, that we will try to understand through this presentation. So, let us get started. So, if we have to define an idyll, so what exactly is an idyll? So, idyll is actually a short poem or an episode in a larger poem which describes a beautiful rural scene or incident. Now, we have learned so far lyric, sonnet, elegy, ode, epic, etc. So, these are separate poetic genres, but I must tell you that idyll is not a separate or specific poetic genre, because it has no particular form. It can be employed in a lyric poem, in a sonnet, in elegy or ode, or even in prose passages also idyll can be employed, idyll can be used by a poet. So, idyll has no specific form of its own. Okay. It is a very short poem, just like lyric, or it is something, sometimes it appears like a episode in a larger poem. Okay. And what this poem is about? The poem describes a beautiful rural scene or incident. So, in short, idyll is nothing but a kind of a very short poem, or it can be a episode in a larger poem, and it describes a beauty of the rural scene or incident. As I said, it is not a poetic genre in the strictest sense, because it has no specific form like that lyric or sonnet or elegy. It has a specific form. Okay. And the theme or the thematic structure of lyric and lyric, epic, elegy is a fixed one. So, it is not something like regarding idyll. Okay. It is a brief poetic image or set of such images. In idyll, what we find is poet is presenting a kind of a picture, but it does not present that picture with the help of colors or paint or brush. Rather, he presents a picture with the help of words. Now, sometimes we see, we read books, and there the writer presents in such a manner that that particular event comes before our eyes, which we can visualize. We can imagine in our mind what is the scene described in that particular passage. So, a writer, if he is writing in such a manner that after reading that particular text or content, we can imagine the picture comes to our mind. So, idyll is something like that. Okay. After reading the idyll, we can visualize, we can imagine what the poet is wanting to say. So, in idyll we find a kind of a poetic image, the poet is presenting a image, or sometimes there are a lot of images, there is a series of images. Okay. As I said, idyll has no fixed form. Like sonnet or epic, it has a specific form. So, like that idyll does not have a fixed form. Sometimes it can appear in a longer poem like epic, or sometimes just a small passage in elegy, or it may appear in even play or epic or ballad. So, in any poetic type idyll can be there. If the poet presents a picture through words, then that particular passage or that particular description can be called as idyll. So, it can appear in any kind of poem, it can be in lyric, it can be a play, it can be in epic, or it can be in elegy or ballad. Okay, because it has no specific form of its own. It is a description where the poet is describing the beauty of a rural scene, and when we find such kind of description and we can visualize that description, we can imagine that description, we can imagine what the poet is wanting to say, then that description can be called as idyll. Okay. So this term idyll is actually, it has Greek origin. Like many concepts in English literature, they have been taken from either Greek literature or Italian literature. So idyll also has a Greek origin, and it has been derived from the Greek word, and the original meaning of that Greek word is little picture. So because we find in idyll, poet is presenting a picture, and therefore this word idyll has been taken from a Greek word, and meaning of that Greek word is little picture. Now this idyll in poetry, it has some two features we can say. Okay, one thing is, in every idyll we find a kind of a precision, we find a kind of a brevity. Brevity means that is shortness, relative brevity is there, because idyll is generally not longer like an epic or like a sonnet like that. So generally it is very short, it is very precise, it is a short poem. This is one feature of idyll. And second feature of idyll is that it has a pictorial effect, because poet is presenting a picture. Poet is describing, maybe he is describing a river or a riverside view, or view of a mountain, or view of a particular field or farm. So in idyll we find a kind of a picture, because if there is no picture, then that particular part of the poem cannot be treated as idyll. So two things are there. One feature is that it is very short one, and second thing is that it presents a pictorial effect. We, after reading that particular passage or paragraph, we can visualize in our mind, we can imagine in our mind. That is called as a pictorial effect. So these two features are there. So as I said, the poet presents a picture with the help of words. He does not paint the picture, as we see a lot of pictures are there in the textbook of small kids. Okay, because such kind of pictures helps them for their better understanding. But as an adult reader, we do not need such kind of pictures painted with the help of colors or brush. Rather, the poet is presenting that picture with the help of words. He writes in such a manner, he describes in such a manner that after reading, we can visualize, we can imagine what the poet is wanting to say. So this pictorial effect, how can a poet achieve? So this effect can be achieved by graphic description. As color is used in case of painting, in a similar manner the poet is actually presenting a graphic description. Graphic description means he writes in such a manner as if those things are just in front of you. Okay, you can visualize, there is a vivid description is there, clarity is there, you can understand every minute details. So such kind of graphical presentation the poet is doing in that short poem, which is called as idyll. Now look at this poem. This is a perfect example of idyll. This is a poem by Lee Allegro, lines written in March. The cock is crowing, the stream is flowing, the small birds twitter, the lake does glitter. Now in every line we can understand a particular action, we can visualize that action. Cock is crowing means suddenly that picture of cock comes into our mind, and early in the morning when that cock is crowing, so that picture comes into our mind. Stream is flowing, we have seen rivers, streams flowing, so suddenly that picture comes into our mind. Small birds twitter, so after reading this line, automatically our mind is shifted to the twittering sounds of the small birds early in the morning. So in all the lines you can see that the poet is describing a kind of a picture, and while reading this poem we imagine, we are able to imagine what the poet wants to say. So this is a perfect example of idyll where the poet is presenting a picture. Now here the poet Lee Allegro has not presented the picture with the help of paint or brush, he is just creating a picture with the help of words. So such kind of poem can be called as idyll. Now some more features of idyll. Every idyll is having a vivid visual description. Visual description means the description after reading which we can visualize. Okay, after reading that particular poem we can visualize. Visualize means we can imagine before our eyes. Suddenly our mind is taken to that particular description, to that particular picture which is evoked by that description. So every idyll necessarily should be a visual description of an idealized or serene environment. Generally, the in the idyll we find that the poet is presenting a very calm, very peaceful atmosphere. The poet may present the scene outside the village where the rivers are there, farm is there, birds are there, flowers are there, trees are there, such kind of picture, or the cattle are grazing, such kind of picture, or the mountains or the hills or the river. So such kind of picture generally the poet is presenting the picture which are peaceful, the picture which are very serene. Serene means that is calm. So such kind of environment we find in the idyll, or in the description of idyll. Then it often creates an impression of beauty. Second feature. Second thing that we have to understand about idyll is that it creates an impression of beauty. After reading the poem of idyll, after reading that description of idyll, we find that poet is talking about beauty there. We find that poet is talking about simplicity, and also the poet is talking about harmony in nature. And then he presents the rural life in an idealized manner. So in most of the idylls we find the poet is talking about that rural atmosphere, very calm and very peaceful atmosphere. He is talking about beauty, he is talking about simplicity, and he is talking about harmony in the nature. Okay, such kind of description, such kind of environment we find in idyll. Pastoral descriptions of Theocritus and Virgil may be considered as idyll. Theocritus was the very first poet who had started writing such kind of idylls, and later on Virgil also wrote, and from them English literature or English poets have adopted this tradition of writing idyll, because most of the concepts in British literature have come from either Greek literature or Roman literature. Okay, so this idyll also has a Greek origin. So idyll writing was started in Greek. Theocritus was the first poet, and he wrote idyll, and later on Virgil and many others also wrote idyll, and his poems can be called as perfect examples of idyll. These are the other examples of English literature. We find a poem, The Village Blacksmith, written by Henry Longfellow. In this poem also idyll is there. Then Alfred Tennyson's anthology is there, English idylls and other poem. It came out in the year 1874. And then Robert Browning's dramatic idyll, written in 1879. So these are some examples of English idyll. Though idyll writing started in the Greek literature, but later on in English literature many poets had written such kind of idylls. Okay, so this is all about idyll, and you just read out this portion from your textbook, and if you face any kind of questions or any kind of doubt, just post it on the WhatsApp group. So in the next video I will present a next topic, last topic that is left, which is satire. So till then, have a good day, take care, and study well at home. Thank you.